and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for Halloween, October 31st, 2024. My name is Tom Luongo, and we have a lot to talk about. It is episode 196, and we were trying to do this yesterday, but apparently we were both just too tired to actually talk into a microphone. I have back with me Mr. Vince Lanci by popular demand because, well, it's been more than 2 weeks since I talked to Vince into a microphone, and that's just 2 weeks too freaking long as far as I'm concerned. Vince, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me, Tom.
As always.
What are we going to talk about?
I don't know. What do you want to talk about? I was thinking the whole BRICS Summit thing, because I will be honest with you, and I was telling you this just before we hit record, which is that I have a confession to make. I didn't actually follow it very closely, even though I know
you're
I'm
a busy
supposed
guy
to.
these days. You're
yeah, because I'm the man stirring up shit all over the world, apparently. Yeah. But yeah, there is that. But what there really is that I wasn't personally expecting much more than what we got, and then when we got what we got, I was like, okay, well, that's a fair number of, for all puns intended, bricks laid in their new foundation of whatever it is they're building. But if you have, I'd like to let you start by telling me what you think you saw, and let's get people up to date, because I think you'll do a better job of it than me trying to retcon.
That's why I think. Thank you. All right, so I think. Yeah, I mean, you can outsource that shit. It's like, you can't fucking do all the work. All right, so the BRICS, the exit of the BRICS, two things were the focus of the exit of the BRICS. The first one was BRICS Pay, which is, well, we'll talk about what it is in a second. And the second one was this contract that they signed, which is kind of like a manifesto. And I'm using that from the communist bloc concept, because it really is a statement that they're going to de-dollarize faster, or at least they intend to. All right, so the BRICS Pay thing, I was wondering what they would do this year too, because there wasn't as much hype going into it. There wasn't what's his name, Escobar coming out saying we have the cure for dollars this year. There wasn't a lot of that coming out, but I did know what they had to do last year. So just last year, they were all given homework, right? And I mentioned this before, but just quickly, right? They all had to get their financial houses in order, number one. Number two, China had to internationalize the yuan more, which we can all attest to that's been happening. And they had to agree on software configurations and what have you. And there was progress made all year to that. And I'm like, all right, so what are they going to do this year? And everyone's so focused on, they're going to have a currency. No, they're not going to have a currency, right? But just to give you the blow by blow, the big marketing push was BRICS Pay this year. So this year it was about BRICS Pay, which is, and I'm simplifying it, but BRICS Pay is, I call it like a monetary passport. All right. And we're not saying it works, but the fact that they were out there with it, talking about it, was really good PR, really good PR. And essentially what it is if you have BRICS Pay, it's a card, right? So you go to Brazil, you can pay in rubles. You go to Russia, you can pay in reals. You can pay in whatever currency. So it's basically a foreign exchange card. That's how I looked at it. Now, okay. But that's what it does is it disintermediates the banks, because FX is where they live. FX, people don't understand it. FX is where banks live. Like, that's why you don't have any futures except for Eurodollars, which is going to die eventually. That trade on exchange. But anyway, I don't want to jump around too much. This is a really important point. You were talking about this on Twitter, and in your service this morning. I was reading your GoldFix point this morning. Actually, I hate to break. We'll go back to BRICS Pay in just a second. Explain this part about the banks being where FX is where they live, because I think a lot of people are under a lot of misconceptions about how banks really operate in the modern world. This is important. So let's diverge into that, and then we'll go back to the BRICS. Right. Well, I mean, in general, banks. I mean, banks make their money as intermediaries. They get in the middle. They're brokers, or they're dealers, or they're broker dealers. And people look at, they're doing it in gold, they're doing it in silver. FX is where they do it the most and the best. Any transaction that goes from one currency to another, they're involved in anything. So they're making a penny 1 trillion times. That's what they do. Okay, to give you an idea of how protective they are of this franchise. In my exchange days, the CME, this is Chicago stuff, right? The CME was mandated. This is the government. The CME wanted to get the FX market to trade futures. They wanted to get FX and futures. This way you can get the companies to bring their hedges there, et cetera, et cetera. And in order to do that, you need liquidity providers. You need a market maker. So once upon a time when they listed gold options, like, Vince, we need you to make markets to get it going, right? It's the chicken and egg thing, right? And, if you're doing natural gas, you need Goldman Sachs, or, if you're doing oil, you need BP or what have you, right? So not that I'm not that big, but I'm a market maker, right? But FX is a completely opaque market, completely. Right? You see the price, but you don't see the deals, right? And that's OTC. Everything is OTC. It's my company is swapping with your company. My bank is representing my company. Your company is represented by your bank. And they provide all the liquidity for global trade. Like, banks are global entities, right? So the electronic aspect of it, the exchanges said, I want to put it on the exchange, right? And the government wants to disintermediate banks, period.
Yes.
And the banks needed to be market makers on the futures products. And they said, fuck you, we're not doing it. And the only product,
just to make sure that I hate to interrupt you, but it's important just to make sure we're OTC means over the counter, folks. It means it's off exchange. Another way of saying is off exchange. Just make sure about that, but that's really important. So the banks were like, yeah, you're not taking our primary business.
Right. Like, to use gold and silver as an example, right? Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, gold and silver, let's just use gold, right? Gold is over the counter, right? If you wanted to buy gold and you were a central bank or anyone, you would call up the bullion bank, and they would have a bank, and they would have a relationship with a producer, and they would broker the deal, right? So when exchanges were created for gold, banks shit themselves, because that takes their private market and makes it transparent, and it allows people to see the price. So banks are survivors. So what they did was, and this you can see, think about this in FX. What they did was, they're like, all right, fine. If the exchanges are going to grow in stature and importance, then we'll deal on them. But we're going to wrap our customers up really closely. So, the producer who you say to them, well, you end up using the exchange to lay off your bullshit, right? And you keep the customer captive. And so while you're using the exchange to make money off your clients, you're saying to them, see, the exchange sucks. You can't get 5 contracts done there. I'll do 500 with you. And so they put a protective mode around their franchises. In FX, good.
Wait, now I guess what you're saying now, this is really important as well. Remember, Vince and I did a podcast previously. I don't remember the episode, but I'll put it in the show notes when I go find it, where we talk about the relationship between the banks and the gold mining companies and how their financing arrangements, which are, if I read you correctly here, you're calling back to that basic thing, arrangement that we talked about, which is that the banks are the financiers for the gold miners. The gold miners are then a captive market to the banks because of their relationship on the financing of the mine in the first place. And the banks will also take care of selling your product for you, yada, yada, yada.
Right. I mean, look, in the world, miners are in different places and end users are in different places, just like any other commodity. And so if you want a deal, you need to find someone who has a financial relationship with everyone. So the banks, they wrap their producers up like, okay, I took you public. You do your hedging through me. I give you a line of credit. And then the end users too. So the banks are just basically, in this case, they're brokers. They get in the middle. Right, broker dealer, but they're in the middle, and they use, here's your free toaster, stay my client. They do things to keep them captive. Now, in the FX world, right? I mean, here's your free
you're right. That's exactly right. It's a brilliant moment, dude. Keep going.
And in the FX world, though, so they survive with precious metals. But the FX world, this is like going back when I was really studying this. In the FX world, they were like, there's no fucking way. You see, in gold and silver, miners will see the price on the screen and they will trade it. And that price is made for whatever reason. And the banks are forced to compromise on their franchise. And of course, destroy the COMEX in doing that. That's what they do, right? Or just use it and abuse it. But on the FX market, they're like, no way. Like that is their bread and butter. Without the FX markets, banks are done. I mean, done's probably a strong word, but that's their transactional bread and butter. Okay. Visa and MasterCard are banks, all that shit. So they're not happy with that. So BRICS Pay, should we come back to BRICS Pay now?
I guess, yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
I just want to make sure that I clarified it. So, by the way, every time you look, just to give you the bottom line, an exchange that's mandated by the government to list a contract, they're trying to take away a franchise from a bank. And the bank either joins the replacement or goes on strike. So the banks went on strike on FX, and there's never been a good futures contract, for FX.
So let me ask you this: maybe this is a dumb question, but now I'm going to ask about options markets on index on funds that track the movement of FX. Does that pull any of this? Is that part of this? Is that another way to try and pull market share away from the banks in order to price?
You mean index funds? You mean like ETFs?
So like an ETF, like EUO, for example, against the euro. And there's a very liquid market in EUO.
Absolutely,
it's a stock I know well because we've been short the euro structurally through it for years. But there's a very liquid market. That's not really an investor and it's a trade in and of itself. It's really exists as and UUP is another one, like the dollar one, right?
Right, the dollar indexes,
right, and so. Are those attempts to quote unquote futurize these markets?
Yeah, they are. They are actually. For example, the reason they don't work, or the reason they work, but they're just not. The currency market is the biggest market in the world. I mean, you can argue that the U.S. bond market is, but the currency market is the biggest market in the world, and so the U.S. really is. Oh, I'm sorry.
Certainly the most liquid.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, in terms of money pure liquidity.
Right. The U.S. is, the UUP, for example, right? So we're going to list the UUP so people can hedge their dollar risk. Like the government and encouraged banks to create products and firms like, Wisdom Tree or what have you, to create products that would compete and take some market share, but they really couldn't do it because, it's an international product. So, the ETF and the index fund, those are all. Look, you create a product on an exchange and you say, this is a security governed by the SEC, the US SEC. Therefore, the rest of the world's not going to use it. So what you do is you try and get the US banks to use it by saying to them, hey, if you make markets on here, there's easy money. And so the Susquehannas, that's not a bank, but the arbitrageurs go, okay, I'll arbitrage the UUP in the US against my dollar trade somewhere else. And they're like, we won't do that. Sorry, that's going to die. And they want it to die. And it never worked,
Okay.
And that's how they protect themselves.
No, that's interesting. Okay. So I think that's a good background. On all the stuff.
So the BRICS Pay, right? So the BRICS Pay, and this is my understanding. There's more to it than that, and I haven't gone into the nuts and bolts as much as I wanted to. But I mean, I studied it before. BRICS Pay, on the surface of it, is a credit card that credit card is not the right word. It's a card that is given to you, the BRICS citizen, that allows you to transact in any currency you want in any country that accepts it. So it removes, you go overseas and you go to those little Forex kiosks to change your dollars for euros. Well, they're gone, right? And those guys are getting it from banks. That's all gone, right? That would be gone. And what it does is, I mean, let's pretend for the moment that it works perfectly. What it does is it disintermediates the dollar. You don't need dollars. Everybody does dollars, because all along the supply chain, you're getting paid and you're paying in dollars. So it's easy. I have dollars in my inventory, I pay. I get paid in dollars, I pay, right? But now it's like, oh, I want to pay in, drachmas or something like that. I can pay in drachmas and that's okay. It's kind of like the bank intermediary is in the card. right? So, and I'm sure there's Russian banks and Chinese banks that are doing the same thing American banks are doing. But the point is, they're broadcast again. We're pretending that it works. They're broadcasting that you don't need dollars anymore. You don't need. You want to trade in your currency, you can trade in your currency, and then to give you an idea, like the marketing savvy. Then they put I don't know how much money it is. It's probably like 10 cents. They put 500 rubles on the card. It's like a debit card. And they're like, here, 500 rubles as a gift. Now you can't use the card yet, right? But there's it's basically a coupon saying BRICS Pay is really cool. Here's why it's really cool. Go to the site and use it. And here's 500 rubles.
Here's a toaster.
Right, exactly, right. But they're marketing, right? They're influencing, right? They're their own little Twitter influencers, and it caused a stir. Well, it went over well. Like everything coming out of the BRICS was for their people. It was like, this is what we're doing. We made our progress. We're doing this, and we're going to sign an agreement. And their manifesto basically was, okay, it's not true, but this is what they said. We have our shit together. We have mBridge, which is the guts of everything for de-dollarization. And from mBridge, we're going to project out spokes, and BRICS Pay is going to be on the end of it. Okay? Right. So their people were like, hey, that's really cool. We don't, we hate that. Like, look, these fucking people in China and these other countries, they're going to sign up for CBDCs because it's a replacement for the dollar. So that's really what it is. Anyway, right. So
that's fascinating. No, so that's a couple of things. So a couple other things to unpack there, right? Which is the entire time you're talking about this. So yeah, it's just okay. So you want to pay in this and receiving that. That's fine. We can do the whole thing. And then we have a payment layer underneath. We have an exchange layer underneath. Mm-hmm. So mBridge. Talk to me about mBridge. Talk to me what you know about the guts of mBridge, so I understand what's going on there. Because then we, of course, have the BIS turning around and saying we may have to pull out of mBridge because
that's the reaction. That's the punchline.
Oh, no, it is the punchline. But let's get get through mBridge first before we go there.
So mBridge is potentially a lot of things, but what it really is simply this: if you're a country that wishes to trade not in dollars but want to trade in your own currency, let's say, so we've got two countries. We've got Russia sells wheat to Saudi Arabia, right? And let's say Saudi Arabia sells oil to Russia. They don't, but let's just say they do, right? So maybe they do. I don't know. That you have to do it in dollars right now. I mean, Russia's out of that picture, but you have to do it in dollars. So the supply chain is all dollars. The wheat, you buy the machinery to grow the wheat, you use dollars. You buy the fertilizer, you use dollars. You're paying people in dollars. And then when the Saudi Arabians give you the wheat, you're paying in dollars. So it's dollars going back and forth every second of the way. And the BRICS contention is, and they're right, is that the fact that everyone has to have dollars artificially suppresses or represses our own currencies. So we would like to trade in our own currencies. And now we would say to them, well, your currency's shit. Like your economy doesn't have anything behind it, and you barely trust each other, right? So I'm just hypotheticaling it.
No, this isn't hypothetical. Oh, this is the arguments that you hear all the time about why the system will not work.
Right. Exactly. So the BRICS decided to create a basket of commodities. I'm giving you the longer version. I'll try and shorten it. The BRICS said, you know what? We don't want to use dollars anymore. We want to do something that's almost like barter. We want to create a basket of commodities that we trade each other with commodities. So let's make a basket, put oil and wheat and pistachios, I like to say, and gold and silver, and we'll trade the basket and we'll pay each other in commodities on paper, but it's real commodities. And they figured out they can't do that. You can't put oil in a basket. You can't put energy in a basket unless you're putting, BTUs or something like that in there. Anyway,
and note, and this would be another reason, for example. The minute they started talking about the Sergei Glaziev idea of having a basket of commodities and currencies to back any new monetary unit, the volatility in oil tripled.
Right. That's
just
right.
to by the way, bad Russians, no biscuit.
Right.
Just,
And
just
that's when and that's when OPEC pushed back as well. I mean, yeah, that's all very true. It's all closely related, very closely related.
mhm.
So what they did was they backed off of oil, they backed off of natural gas. These are not things that you can standardize because Saudi Arabia sells oil, but they don't really do anything with it. So another country buys oil and they make airplanes out of it. They make gasoline out of it. And so the economic difference in oil, you can't use that. But what can they agree on? They can agree on gold.
Mhm.
Okay. And so what they need is the whole dollar thing is it's not dollars. I mean, it is dollars, but it's treasuries. I need to have dollars because everything is done in dollars. And so you don't put dollars in a money market if you're a country, you buy treasuries. And the treasuries are liquidated and used as dollars, or the treasuries are margined and used as dollars, or the treasuries throw off dollars in dividends or coupons, however you want to look at it. So they need something that is as safe as treasuries used to be. They need something that is as stable as treasuries used to be, and they need something that's going to, you know, uh, be truly neutral as treasuries are not. And so the weaponization of the dollar in the SWIFT system, the SWIFT system is basically the plumbing that the dollars go back and forth in,
Right.
on Russia made them all freak out. They're like, all right, let's start dumping our treasuries. I mean, they were selling them already, but they start selling them at a faster pace. And so they say, now we're coming back to the BRICS basket. Now they go, we got it. Oil, natural gas, pistachios, screw it. Let's just use gold. How much gold? 40%. 40% of the basket is made up of gold. The other 60% is made up of their own currencies. So
Mhm.
the 40% is like an anchor, right? And this is what they don't have done yet. How much of whose currency goes in the basket? This
Of
is where
course.
the fighting is going to come. This is like,
Of course. Of
this
course.
exactly. So, but they're not talking about that at the meeting. But at the meeting, so mBridge basically is, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to buy wheat from you. You're going to buy oil from me. At the end of the month, we're going to see what the difference is, and we'll settle it with an mBridge token.
Yep.
And the mBridge token is 40% gold and 60% something else. And the something else is going to be a mix of currencies. It has to be currencies. I want it to be silver. I know it's wishful thinking. I think it can be silver eventually. And I'm seeing signs of that, not to get off track, because with Russia
Okay.
saying that's strategic metal now, et cetera, because it's the only other metal that you can use that's not going to be consumed. Okay, so the mBridge concept really is barter of commodities. And why commodities? Why not everything? Because if you are scheduled to give me wheat and you don't, fuck the gold. It's war. Like I
Right.
can't eat, right? These are existential trades. And so
Yes.
you don't miss your mortgage payment. You miss your credit card payment. That's
Mhm.
basically it. These are mortgage payments. And so they're like, all right, we know you're going to make that payment or it's war. So we'll use this mBridge concept, right? And so that's the guts of it. And so basically I'm going to buy wheat from you, you're going to buy oil from me. At the end of the month, we see what the difference is, and we settle with an mBridge unit. Unit's the word that people are using now. It won't be called the unit, but it's based on a concept called the unit, which goes all the way back to, believe it or not, Keynes.
Mhm.
It was his idea under
Right.
under something called Bancorp. But anyway, so it works, right? It works. They've done it. And I'm going to give you three things that show the progress going up to the BRICS event. In June, United Arab Emirates said that they transacted something like $50 million using the mBridge platform, and it worked. So they basically used their own currency in mBridge to buy oil or something, or sell oil, and it worked. That's June. In September, now, they already know about BRICS Pay. They're just not talking about it yet, right? So the Western banks are looking at this going, okay. And Western governments are looking at this going, okay. And so the BIS announces in September, well, they've been talking about it, but they announce it. It's ready to go. What's ready to go? Agora. What's Agora? Agora is their answer. They don't call it this. It's their
Mhm.
answer to mBridge.
Yep. Yep.
And for perspective, BIS was the technological innovator, quote, for lack of a better word, that was involved in developing mBridge. So the West is already involved in their product, but it's an espionage thing. We're trying to see what we can get off of them. Who's in control? The BIS, or China? Well, it's China, which we're going to find out. So the BIS announces Agora, right? And Agora is everything mBridge is. In fact, a friend of mine, Matt Riley, who's very well versed in this, and he's done the drilling down.
Yeah. I've watched a couple of podcasts with Matt.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
very sharp.
Most recently, he and I were having jokes about it because we're like, oh, look at that. The BIS presentation had puzzle pieces for mBridge, and so did the Agora presentation. And so we basically think they used the same fucking secretary to put these presentations together. Anyway, so it's the same, like it's the same thing. It's the knockoff. You know what I mean? It's the knockoff. All right. So you've got June, UAE says, Dubai basically says, yeah, we're transacting in this if we want to, right? And then September, the BIS says, and they put out their platform. They say, we have a platform now. And overnight, the announcement is like every fucking Western bank signs up for it.
Of course.
This is the counter to mBridge. And then October, after the meeting, right after the meeting, BIS comes out and says, you should say it. Just say what it is, what they did.
Yeah, I said we can't really be involved in mBridge anymore because of the American sanctions on Russia. That's what.
Wow, what did they figure that out? Wow, there's sanctions on Russia.
Really, all of a sudden, like it's the most sanctioned country in the history of the planet.
Right, exactly. Hey, did you know that Russia wants to it's just classic banker stuff. Yeah. Right. And it's classic. I'm sorry. I'm not shitting on bankers. It's classic finance stuff. And I want to give you a humorous example. But before I do, basically, if you're trying to figure out what the BIS has access to gold. The BIS has money. The BIS has a network to the West. So the BRICS are like, we want the BIS involved because this is about money. The Bank of International Settlements is about money. They're not about ideology. They're not. Right? Nazi gold during World War II, they did it all, right? They're like this. All right. So you want us to suppress gold? Okay, fine. You want us to buy gold? Okay, fine. Right now they're still suppressing it. So now you've got this game of chicken. The BIS is like, yeah, we'll help you out. We'll help you out. And so you see it's like the BIS is in the middle of this hub of four banks, Thailand, China, I don't even know who the other ones are. Indonesia, I forget it. Thailand, China, and Hong Kong, and one other. And it looks like it's like presented to the West in the limited amount of information they give us as BIS is, in control. They're not. The joke that I came up with Matt in a conversation about this this is the scene from Batman where Bane walks in on the businessman and says, "You think you're in charge?" Right.
You feel in charge?
Right. Do you feel it? Right. On his hand, on his shoulder.
That moment. Yeah.
That was it. And the PBOC, the technology arm of the PBOC, my guess is the BIS, either the BIS quit or the PBOC made them have to quit by saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And the BIS, quote, pulled the plug on it because it was their project. Well, great. It'll be like buying a knockoff CD, like on the street, or a VHS tape when you were a kid, made in China.
No, it's like buying a watch off the streets in Manhattan. And it's a Bulova, except it's got an extra eye in it or something like.
Right. Or the Movado where the second hand doesn't move. It just sits there.
Exactly.
I had one of those, but the 80s, the black watches with the gold thing on them. So it looks to me like what the BRICS did, even though it wasn't big fanfare, conveyed what they wanted to their people. Hey, if you use the BRICS pay, you won't have to use dollars. And so they're all like getting into it, right? And in the West, they're saying to the West, we are going to move forward with de-dollarization. Now, there's a lot of shit they have to figure out behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
They talk a big talk. They talk a big talk. Meanwhile, Russia can't pay its bills to the Shanghai Cooperative because they don't have enough dollars. Like, there's all shit that they have to work out. And basically their payment chain is a problem. We have to fix our supply chains. They have to fix their payment chains. Same idea every time. All right. So
at the end of the day, like, payment chains are easier to fix because at the end of the day, someone can always say, you know what? You owe it to me in barrels of oil. You owe it to me in tons of grain. You owe it to me in terms of natural gas. As long as the Chinese don't need the dollars per se.
No, I agree. I mean, the common sense comment about payment chains versus supply chains is supply chains are real. Payment chains are abstract. And supply chains, you have to dig for the oil, drill for the oil. Supply chains are, well, you can probably buy most of the technology off the shelf now. And this is where I think Westerners like myself, people that are very more real, looking at the real aspect of it, the fact that real assets are coming back. I think some of the Western people, and myself too, I have to remind myself, forget that. It's not the tech. This is where the problem is going to be for the BRICS. It's not the technology. It's the negotiation and the network. You know, like, so it's like, okay, we agree on this basket. We agree in principle, 40% gold. How much of your currency is going in? Fuck you. I want more of my currency in. Because ultimately, even though they love gold, they love their currencies more and they want their currencies to be out there. So the infighting becomes when you're creating a cartel. It's kind of like OPEC. It's
absolutely, BRICS is just another price fixing cartel. Like, that's all it is. But the goal now is the price fix the price of commodities that they all produce that the West needs. Now, it's an enviable position to be in, because now they get to fight about, how much money each of them get to make, but they're all making money. So this is where I'm going to thank you for all of that, Vince. It was outstanding. It's exactly.
So we'll move on. We're done with that. All right. We'll move on.
No. We're not, because we're going to keep going. Because what's interesting about this is that I've been thinking about all of this recently, in terms of cartel theory, in terms of cartelization of markets and everything else. And
did you say cartelization?
Cartelization, yes, cartelization.
All right, I thought we were talking about medical diagnosis here for a second.
No, we're not talking. It's not sarcoidosis, and it's not sarcoidosis. Okay,
right, exactly.
In order to make this into an episode of House,
right? I love that shit.
Yeah, I love that. So Camille's rewatching it for the ninth time.
Yeah, it's great. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, the number.
You were studying cartels. You were studying cartels.
But every time I think about House, I'm like, oh my God, how many hot chicks? But stop me before I sub-reference again. The hat tip Dennis Miller, the god of Gen X comedy. What's important is in cartelization, and so when you think about the formation of a cartel, right? One of the things I wrote about last month for the newsletter was exactly this, right? That cartels form when there's an arbitrage, like when there's an imbalance in the market between the demand and the supply for a thing. Well, let's just say, and I like to use labor as the introduction to this, because it's the one that everybody understands. They understand
labor arbitrage is the most easy to understand. You're right. Yeah.
And it's also the one that gets everybody the most, and it gets everybody's like, oh, cool, this is something important, right? Hey, when the robber barons, and I'm using my scare quotes here, are exploiting labor turns around and goes, you know what? We're all going to band together and we're going to force the robber barons to give us, better pay. And that's what they should do. And when there's an arbitrage between the value of the labor, that's and what it's being and the amount that labor is going to share in the profits of the firm, when that's out of whack, that's when we have a fight between labor and management. And eventually labor comes together and they collectively bargain and they force management eventually to accede to some demands.
Right.
But that process collapses the arbitrage, and now the need for the labor union, which is just another price fixing cartel, goes away. The problem solves itself,
right,
and then it goes away. And now eventually, of course, the management is going to push, and there's going to still be a push and pull, and it's a process as the pressure is relieved, right? And the pressure goes down between management and labor. But when you see a cartel that refuses to die, in the same way that you and I, in one of one of the podcasts we did, we talked about the Shanghai versus Chicago arbitrage on the price of gold, about 6-8 months ago. We did that podcast, and we say when you see an arbitrage that doesn't close, that means that there's an imbalance being put in place to enforce it
by government.
Government generally, yes.
Regulatory arbitrage. Yes,
regulatory arbitrage. Now, in this case, it's exactly the same thing about OPEC. OPEC as a cartel should have been destroyed by the free market forces and cheating and just allowing everybody to cheat the rules of the cartel ages ago. Fucking OPEC should have lasted.
They're constantly cheating. I can't believe they're still together. But yes, you're right. You're right.
But why? Because the powers that be that don't have the oil keep trying to pressure the cartel to split apart. and they keep attacking oil. What's Davos' raison d'etre? Destroy the oil markets because Europe doesn't fucking have any.
Right, right.
So what they're trying to do is, and so they're constantly pushing. They don't understand that I wish they have to understand this. And so they're doing this for a reason. I'm not sure what that reason is at this point, but they keep pushing OPEC closer and closer together.
Right.
Because every time they think they get close to doing end run around oil producers, the oil producers, collapse on themselves together. And we went from OPEC to OPEC plus by adding Russia. Now we have BROPEC plus by adding in Brazil. It keeps getting, the cartel keeps getting bigger and stronger, but it's as a defensive reaction to an external force.
Right.
But what do you fucking think BRICS is, folks? The more we've weaponized the dollar, the more the more you're accelerating these people coming together to trade not dollars.
Right. If you give them a common enemy. Right. If you give them a common enemy.
Putin's been saying, we didn't leave the dollar system. We were kicked out.
Right. Right.
Iran has been saying the same thing. Jim Sinclair told the entire fucking world back in 2010 when Obama first threatened UBS over their secrecy laws to open up the Swiss banks.
I remember that.
They get the Nazi gold. Jim literally said, that's the dumbest fucking thing that they could ever do. That's the golden goose. SWIFT is the means by which the dollar system operates. You go nuclear and then, they got the Swiss to not go under, but they couldn't get the Iranians to not go under. And then fucking Obama did it in December of 2011 and Iran survived. Yeah, they survived by trading mung beans for oil and washing machines and everything else for their oil, but they did it.
Right.
And eventually they were able to survive it. And so they provided that blueprint. That blueprint is the same blueprint that the Russians used in 2014, 2015. And now both of those examples are what do you think these finance ministers are talking about at BRICS? They're going, the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese to a lesser extent are all walking into these meetings going, we can do this. These guys have already proven they can fight dollar hegemony this way. And this is how we do it. And so this is all a natural reaction. And so BRICS as a cartel exists purely because we created them. The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. It's not that fucking hard. Hate to drop a Star Wars reference on you, Vince, because I know you're a Star Trek guy. Well, dude.
Tarkin.
You guys missed the conversation we had about Led Zeppelin and Jethro Tull. That's for our subscribers.
Tull sucks. Tull sucks. Zeppelin rules. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, that's what we were doing. We were fighting about who was worse. Oh fuck. Sociologically, I disagree with you. Okay, watch, right? So yes, we do keep pushing, and that makes them stay together, right? We are the enemy that allows them to bond together.
Right.
But we know that. And I think that as long as there's an enemy, we can continue to do what we're doing. Like if there isn't an enemy, it fragments. It's like, that we're hurting. And I think
that's a really
speaking about OPEC, not the BRICS now, not the BRICS. Speaking about OPEC, Saudi Arabia has been our ace in the hole forever.
Right.
Aramco has been our bitch. Right? And we've been their bitch too, right? So it's almost like I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying you're wrong about OPEC. No, I am saying that we get a little bit too zealous. We say, you know what? OPEC's looking kind of weak, right? Let's fuck it. Let's just do shale, and OPEC, and that just makes OPEC just become friends again. And then all of a sudden Aramco's like, you know what? Saudi Aramco's like, well, you know what? You guys are being dicks again. My Iranian boys are like pissing, getting upset. I'm going to have to be friends with them. And so Saudi Arabia is basically the mob. They're just going back and forth, whoever pays them more money. But the BRICS thing,
of course,
I'm not saying that you're wrong. I am saying that everything that you're describing, whether we create the enemy or whether we want the enemy or who gives a shit about that, what everything you're saying comes down to the arrogance of incumbency. Mm-hmm. We're in control. We're in power. We get sloppy. 2014 happens. Putin, Crimea, that shit, right? We're in control, we get sloppy, and then the OPEC becomes buddies again.
Right.
OPEC could have been destroyed. OPEC, like, I'm actually kind of agreeing with you a little bit. OPEC's
Yeah.
kind of OPEC is producing and exporting countries. See, when you have a cooperative in a mercantile system, you have cooperatives between buyers and sellers. So industries become partners and they say, okay, we're going to do the trade, fuck the outside world, and they create a mercantile exchange, right? But the reason thing about OPEC is only producers and exporters. It's not an association of end users. How the fuck are they still in business? Why
Right.
haven't we divided them yet? Like, why? So,
And you can make the argument, and I think you touched on the possibility here of what was actually going on, what's actually going on, which is that you could flip my entire argument around on its head and look at it from the West point of view, which is the
we
reason
want it that
we want them to do that, because this way we actually create them as the other in order to keep everybody within the West in our system.
controlled opposition.
Maybe that's the whole thing. I wouldn't call it controlled opposition. I would just call them the convenient boogeyman for a different
By the way,
for a different operation. That's basically what you were saying. And I'm like, the minute you said that, I'm like, well, that's a fair avenue to explore. No,
post Cold War, we needed the Islamophobia. I mean, right or not, they became the boogeyman. So I guess OPEC is a representation of that.
That's possible. But but where we are now is there's the other side of this. Maybe, and gets back to something that I've been talking about for a while, which is now let's start talking about what the Fed's actually been doing, raising interest rates and the liquidity and SOFR and all this other stuff. And how many times have you and I talked about this? How many times have I ranted into a microphone about that you've got a Fed chair who believes there's more than one, there's room in the world for more than one reserve currency. Yeah. How many times have we talked about, look, the globalization of the dollar or whatever it is coming to an end, and it's a burden that the United States no longer wants to carry, or at least the American banks and the American banking system and the American industrial conglomerates doesn't want to bear anymore. And especially if the cartel of the quote unquote G7 is breaking down as well, because the other 6 in the G7 have turned predatory against the 7th one, which is the big kahuna at the freaking table, which is the United States.
That's right. That's right. Europe is not our Europe.
Cannibalize each other. If they can't cannibalize the rest of the world, or they can't break off, then they turn predatory on themselves.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing now.
Right. We're the cartel that's being broken up now.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
The monetary cartel.
But again, it's because one group decided that what they were really trying to do, and now I call it Europe, Davos, whatever you want to call it, and the British remnant is not hands clean here or anything, certainly, but they made the push because they wanted to get rid of the commercial banks, because their goal, go right back to the beginning of this conversation, what she's talked about, disintermediating the banks. That's what the whole push for retail central bank digital currency is about, and all the rest of it. That's what they were thinking. That's what they were thinking in terms of. That's, I think, probably the nut of this entire conversation, which is the reason they did all this was to push for a new system that disintermediated away from the commercial banks, which are preventing the apotheosis of the central banks.
Right. That's right. And I mean, this is a tangent, but that's why I think there's, Goldman's recently been saying, Goldman's a lot of good things and a lot of bad things, depending on how you look at it. But Goldman's brought up something recently that I've seen stick in a couple of their reports, and they're using the word of, They're talking about the Fed, and they're talking about the de-emphasis on the Fed. I mean, we all were talking about fiscal dominance and yada yada yada, but the terminology they use to describe the Fed as being folded into the Treasury, or the Fed as being rendered useless. And I'm not saying that's happening, but I know that Powell is probably saying, I need to justify my existence on some level, and because he's pushing back against all the American version of the WEF. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, what I would say, what I think is going on, and I still believe this, and given everything we just said, that this is something I brought up to Daniel Booth when I first asked her about it, when I first had her on the podcast a year and a half or almost 2 years ago now, which is with SOFR, with the secured overnight financing rate, do we really need the Fed funds rate? The Fed funds rate's already been basically replaced anyway by the band of IORB and SOFR, right? Which is interest on reserve balances, or what used to be called interest on excess reserves, and SOFR, and so the Fed funds rate exists within that band, right? And
it used to be important. It's not really important anymore.
No, it's not really. It really isn't as important as you think it is, right? Now, at the end of the day, if we have an indexing rate, right, that trades on the open market, is securitized by the repo markets and everything else, then yeah.
I gotta feed them.
Okay, take it. Go ahead, and we'll cut it here for a second. That's fine. I'll be able to find it.
Just pause it so you don't have to worry about it.
No, that's fine.
Come here. Fed funds.
So this is something I talked about when I first had Daniel DiMartino Booth on the podcast about almost two years ago now, which was, I asked her at some point about SOFR, and I said, we already know that, is this possible, since we have this debt indexing rate that is secured by the repo markets and all that, and that we can have a re-regionalization of the Fed funds rate? Because now we have a tradable index that quotes on a daily basis. Now everybody can quote versus what used to be LIBOR can now quote versus SOFR, and banks in Mississippi can quote under SOFR by 25 basis points, and banks in California will have to quote 50 based on the demand for money locally.
I just want to throw a sentence in here. I just want to draw attention for your listeners. The re-regionalization. That's a good phrase, because we're preparing the world for multipolarity, multi-currency, and that means we have to re-regionalize our money. That's really a good phrase.
Not only, it's applicable in the big context, but it's really applicable in the American context, where the monolithic singular Fed funds rate is against the original conception of the Fed. So while Goldman is now talking about, the Fed being reabsorbed into the Treasury, which is a very globalist talking point, what you're really
absolutely.
What you're really talking about potentially is the return of the Fed back to its original mandate, which was to be a lender of last resort and a provider of liquidity on a regional basis, which is why we have 12 regional banks with 12 regional reserves, and they were all supposed to be quoting different interest rates based on the demand for money locally. That was the Fed's original conception, right? So we have this terrible Federal Reserve we have today. And, I brought that concept up to Danielle, and at the time I barely understood the implications of my own question to her. And she said, well, yeah, that's absolutely possible, but they'll never give that power up. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right about that, but thank you for at least corroborating, the concept. Yeah. But
centralizers love to centralize, right?
Yeah. Of course. But here's the thing, is Powell the guy to actually start that process? And if we're talking about the regionalization of currency blocks again, and because at the end of the day, the currencies are just the things they're just the medium of exchange.
Right.
You and I have been talking about stores of value and units of account, which are the really important roles that money occupy in order to create a system where we can accurately price risk, which is the whole purpose of all this fucking shit in the first place. Right. Is how much is it going to cost me to get a loan to do a thing that I want to do? And, and everybody's looking for the proper signal. And then I get to put on my Austrian hat and go, yep, can we have an actual honest to God market interest rate? Well, we're do.
So our fucking fees when it comes to money, The dollar is just a unit of, not even, it's a convenience. It's the network that makes it. It could be fucking puka shells. I don't care.
Right. It doesn't matter. And this is one of the reasons why I'll be honest with you, Vince. The more I go through this, the more I'm like, I've watched a retail central bank digital currency in Nigeria fail. I've watched it fail in China to date. The digital yuan has been a failure, right? Because the people don't want it.
And it should be easier for them, just to put
right.
It should be easier for them, and they will get it, but they have to really demonize the dollar in the U.S. to do it. So
but they also have to demonize. They also have to demonize the existing yuan. Like they have
Yeah.
to demonize cash. They have to demonize all of those things.
Well,
And
they're
at
trying
some
to marry it, but that's the big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course they are. And they're going to try and nudge us. And I
Right,
mean that in the word, in terms of the word, the book, nudge
right,
us towards the things that they want us to, um, they want us to go. The truth of the
right.
matter is, though, at the end of the day, like if we just turn around and say, you know what, no, and you can, but you know, the price for this convenience is going to be that you know everything about me, and you can tell me that I'm not allowed to order a pizza because I'm fat, because my
Right,
Apple Watch tells me tells you that my blood pressure is too high. Guess what? We start trading fucking salt.
right. Salt,
Like
you mean
that's
like,
it. It's like that's and then everything goes and everything changes. Like this is why it's failed in Nigeria. It's why it's failing in China, and it's why it'll never work here.
but that it will never work. I mean, never is a strong word to use for me, but
Yeah,
it
that's
won't
true.
because
Okay,
you can't replace the dollar.
most likely 95%. I'll leave the 5% chance that they'll pull this shit off. But
It's generational. It's like the smart, powerful elites, the one that know what they're doing. They're like, you can't push people so far so fast.
right.
Oh, they're doing it in Nigeria. Let's see how it goes there. Yeah, learn from everyone else's mistake, and the U.S. doesn't have to do it. And we'll do it eventually over 2 generations because you need us to die. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you need the economic. I mean, it's kind of like the Israelites were in the desert for 40 years. Why were they in the desert for 40 years? Because they all needed to die before they actually went into the promised land. So it's like
The old guard had to,
generationally,
metaphorically speaking, the old guard had to die off before the next new generations
yeah.
could walk in.
And so they're not going to push us. We'll be the last country to do it because to create um, um, uh, digital currency for the U.S. is to replace the dollar.
Right.
You can't. We are
Well, no,
the
they wanted what
digital
they
currency.
wanted to do is, I mean, these people are so hubristically insane
Right.
that hubris has driven them so mad.
Mhm.
Certainly with envy, because half of them are German.
Right.
And no
What?
no offense, but I'm Italian, so it is what it is.
Yeah, well, we
Um,
we made a bad choice that one time.
yeah, I mean, we did, and but we've made a lot of bad choices. We're Italians, and
That's right.
and then
That's
we
right.
rectify them, and then we go on, and then we go back to making food, and
That's right.
and
That's right.
cars that may or may not work, but at least they'll look good doing it.
But they look fucking good. That's right.
Yeah,
They look
exactly.
good. They
The
look good.
Italians love to make cars. They like to make beautiful things. Sometimes they even make a good one every once in a while.
Sometimes they work,
That's
right?
really not the priority in Italy, is to make a good car. It's to make a beautiful car. Like it's not
Art
forget
that
about
drives, it doesn't have to drive as long as it looks good.
it's like that's
I agree.
yeah, we'll work on that later. We'll make that work later. So but look at it, it's gorgeous.
It's
So
beautiful.
and that's the thing. And I think the I don't know. I just to that level of need for control, and then the level of need for not even sure for control is really the word, but it's like, and they're so scared of losing their own potency, because I'm telling you, within the European colonialist mindset is this
Mhm.
entitlement to
Yeah,
rule, and it's everywhere, and they've taught it to us, and it's bad, and they've taught it to
right.
other countries as well, and it's
Yeah,
bad, and it's the kind, and entitlement is always the enemy of innovation and everything else. So
that's right. Only, I mean, I've found that out even more recently. Uh, the only time I get anything done is when I have to do it.
yeah.
So
Of course. I mean, it's a struggle every day to get up and remind yourself, it's easy to get up every day and work really freaking hard when you're starving to death. Like it's really easy. I know what I have to do. But the minute
right.
your time preference starts to push out in time, and
Leisure time is the enemy. Let's get into the fucking fields and start,
well,
growing crops again.
yeah,
I'm just,
dude, I raised goats for 12 years. I can tell you,
I
like,
know.
I don't want to live like that anymore. I just don't. So, all right. Well, this has been fascinating, Vince. It really has. I know you have to run. So I'm just really glad we caught up. Aside from anything else, just to shoot the shit with you, man, because it's always a great pleasure and a great honor. So, is there anything else you want to tell people on the way out the door, or you got any
Well,
final
I want to
thoughts?
say
Drop 'em here.
congratulate. I want to say congratulations. Did you? I don't hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but did you do something with Alex Jones recently?
Yeah, we taped yesterday actually. A thing. I'm hoping it comes out in a few weeks. We'll find out.
That's cool.
I hope it happens. I hope it happens. We did tape something yesterday, and we'll see what happens.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Okay. So yeah, thank you for having me on. It's always great to be here. And it's good to talk about the conversations before we start recording are actually are even getting even better now. But yeah, there's a lot
just
of
so
things
you know, just so you know, folks, Vince did sandbag me with the whole thing about the Led Zeppelin versus Jethro Tull, and it was like, interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Let's go there, and it was fun.
I started recording before he even knew I was doing it. Anyway,
yeah. So what you're saying, Vince, is that you're actually a closet member of the intelligence blob. Got it?
Closet.
Here you are, 5 days before the election, and now you're trying to entrap me.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm bearish.
I'm just checking. I'm just making sure. All right, we're good.
You guys are crazy.
All right, man. You be good. We'll round up soon. All right.
Vote Kamala.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 196 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. I want to thank Vince for a lively discussion both before and during the show. As always, it is fun. We did a little bit of a little bit of a dive into our love of 70s music and beforehand, and that was fun. Vince got me talking about my other thing that, the other Tom that might have been, so it was always fun. As always, so you can follow my work over at my blog over at tomluongo.me or goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, and of course you can sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can get just the twice weekly market reports and private blogs and the audio from our discussion about music this morning. Or you can also sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter, which shows up every month to try and make sense of what's going on in the world, take a peek ahead with myself and Dexter White taking care of helping you make sense of a world going slowly mad. So with that said, I'm out. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. And keep your stick on the ice.